Hey guys, so today we're going to take a look at Unity and Lens Studio. This video is not really a comparison of these two products. It's mostly like a help to learn the difference between them. Myself, been learning Unity before Lens Studio. I come from a Unity background. So Unity developers, I'm here and I come in peace for you, just to let you see what Lens Studio is about and what are the similarities or not similarities between the two softwares. For me, making a comparison of these two a game engine, it's a little bit of a silly thing to do, and having bias against someone or against one or against the other one, it doesn't really make sense. I feel like the right way to engage XR and all of the tools and the developer environment that comes with it is more something like we gotta learn them all and then maybe understand what is the one that we need the most, what we prefer, and just focus on that for some specific reasons. Just think about a full stack developer, right? Just think about a full stack software engineer that goes through the front end, the back end of the website, or become specialized in microservices, become specialized in monetization. I think for me, I see the development environment, the spectrum of software and tools available for developers is constantly increasing, which is a good sign for XR generally. And I believe both of these tools really helped me to create incredible experiences. So without further ado, let's get into all of the two software and understand what are the major differences and why one versus the other one, for what reasons, and the advantages, right, to use one versus the other one for your use case. So this is going to be pretty much like a video from a Unity developer's perspective, and I really hope that helps you, because I believe a lot of developers that engage Lens Studio come from a Unity background. So it really kind of like the first questions that a developer has is like, oh, why is not done in this way? In Unity it was like that, now it's like that. So I'm going to tell you mine. Also, there is a lot of personal thoughts in this, meaning that after I develop almost apps with Lens Studio for about 6-7 months, I can tell you what I really like about it and why as a Unity developer, you might give it a shot and understand why you might like it. So when you enter Lens Studio, and this is the very basic setup, right? You see a very similar UI to Unity. You have a preview, which is the game view for Unity. You have the inspector, which remains the inspector. You have the logger, and I also recommend to use not just the logger, but also TypeScript status. As you know that Lens Studio, we recommend to use TypeScript for Lens Studio. Lens Studio allows you to use TypeScript and JavaScript. However, TypeScript is a lot more similar to C#. So if you are a Unity developer, definitely use TypeScript and try really to think in those terms, because that's the closest to C# and gets the job done like JavaScript. So my great recommendation is really to think of TypeScript as your number one language to develop in Lens Studio. You have a TypeScript status and a logger. So these are the two main loggers. The logger is a little more general. So in terms of, it gives you like general logs, but then if you go on TypeScript status, you can actually get very granular information about your TypeScript utilities. So that's really helpful. You also have an asset browser here. So very similar to Unity, there is a separation between asset and packages. Good practice for you is really just do not modify things that go into packages, as long as you don't think is a good idea for your specific use case to duplicate the package or create a modified version of that package, or just like dragging and dropping it into the asset and just mark it as a modified. I highly recommend you to do not change things in the packages. Packages are meant to be something that eventually gets updated in the future, and you actually get those updates. A little bit like it happens with prefabs and so on. Then you have a scene hierarchy. Again, is very similar to Unity, right? So you have scene hierarchy and a scene. Now, let's try to open a project which is for spectacles, because mostly here we are talking about XR. So let's go into, let's open Essential, because Essential is actually a project that we put together thinking really of you as a Unity developer. So there's a lot of things that makes you really think that things that you were doing in Unity are actually also possible here, which is really not, again, not a comparison. It's just saying, okay, I want to have an easy way to work with this tool, and I just want to have some kind of common ground between the two, so I don't have to get crazy every time, right? So let's get into this project. You will notice right away that when you are in a project for spectacles, you actually are as a default in this kind of interactive preview. So something nice about Lens Studio, which I really enjoy, is the fact that in every SAR project for spectacles, so in every AR project, you get for free this sort of interactive environment. This is very nice, because usually in Unity, what I experience is that there is a sample scene in the URP setup. There's, for example, like a chair with some walls in there, but it's pretty much something that you see from a far view, almost like an isometric far point of view, which depends what camera you have. But you're not like immersed into your space as you are in this kind of preview. This preview is very close to what you're gonna experience on device. There is actually a field of view simulator as well. So if you eventually you have, let's go on mini demos, and let's just open one. Let's say this one. So if you open this demo, you notice that there is already a field of view that gives you an understanding and really helps you to imagine what things are going to be looking on device. You're also going to have this nice WASD way to just go around. And all of these surfaces, this is not just, by the way, this is not a 360 image. This is actually real geometry. So let's say that you are testing something with a raycast or something like you're instantiating things on the floor and things like that. Actually, things here have a reaction to physics. So it's very helpful to know these things. You can also enjoy and have a lot of different environments. So you have an evening room, colorful home, and all of the different, this is more of like what Unity gives you out of the box, for example. And you have outdoors, and it's really nice to try your application in different environments, because in the end, you're going to try this. Let's remember that you're going to try these things on glasses in a way. And this is really what matters. Things can look good in the editor, but what it really matters the most is when you try on glasses. Another thing that I want to mention is that, as you notice, there is no synchronization at this time between the scene and the game view. You see that these ghosts that are now moving and are instantiating and projecting toward me, these are not actually available in the scene view. The reason why they're not available in the scene view is because these two things are not synchronized, and the ghost that you see here, it's probably part of a script that instantiates them on a runtime. So runtime is not synchronized on the scene view, which probably for me, this was the major change that I experienced as a Unity developer. I was really used to abuse of double view of game and scene and just toggling something in the scene and scene in the game view. This is great, and actually there are a lot of development on the roadmap to go toward that direction. But at the same time, I noticed how I was spending so much time in the editor instead of actually trying things on device. This is something that I do a lot more using Lens Studio. And the thing is that when you build things on glasses, in Lens Studio, things takes very small time. When you build on glasses, it takes like 5 seconds to build. So let's try to build now together. Just connected my specs to Lens Studio, and we're just gonna try to send the lens and see how long this takes. Take a moment. All right, so the app is built and took around 9.4 seconds. So this is a major change with a lot of different devices that I used in Unity. Generally, no matter what the device is, I tend to believe that a lot of times it would take a good 3 minutes, also 4, and depending also from the size of the project. So this is very lightweight of Lens Studio to allow me to try so many times the app and don't wait those 3-4 minutes. It seems like not too much, but actually it is. And that brings you to think that you want to have everything logged out in Unity first. So you try so much in the editor. There are so many input simulators. You just spend a lot of time on the editor. And what would happen to me sometimes is that I would spend so much time on the editor, which I would tend to naturally completely bypass the part of the testing on the device. And I would do it very last minute. I would say, I would just take for granted everything works in the editor. I tested so many times. I have so many simulators. So I'm assuming everything works on device. Then I just try it on device. Something is off. Maybe I forgot that there was a world position and instead should have been a local position. And that instead, really, see, if you just build every time here and it's so fast, it brings you to think a lot more about how to build your application in the moment rather than just at the very end. At least this is me, but I'm pretty sure that to a lot of developers, this also happened too. So going back to the editor and the UI and the window, I think these that I listed before are really the major difference for me. Everything else is pretty much the same. We have different, of course, in Unity, you just go on the asset store, and here instead you go on the asset library. The asset library, differently from Unity, is embedded in the editor. Actually, if you are old enough to remember how was the first versions of Unity, if you remember, actually the asset store was embedded in the editors too. But then they brought it out and there is more of a web version now. This asset library that Lens Studio allows you to find here in the editor also has all of these assets are free, and there is no market for an asset library, which is a double-edged sword, right? If you are planning to make money out of making assets for developers, maybe this is something that you cannot exactly do in this way. At the same time though, what you notice is that everything is free for you to develop with. So you are really free to just get a lot of tools. Also taking the chance to show you a little bit what's going on the spectacle side of things. There are a lot more assets that we prepared, particularly some utilities that are things that I believe in Unity you would do quite a lot, and these utilities are also inspired by this project called Essentials, not for nothing. Things like instantiation, things like solvers, which are spatial behaviors, things like gizmos, and set up for a basic leaderboard, which is something that developer really asked for a lot, and a little bit of understanding how accessing components are in Lens Studio. Because sometimes what happens is that you might find projects where there is a JavaScript utility and a TypeScript utility, and you need to access to a script and to another one. Also, the way you access script or you access children, child of scene objects, which are Unity game objects, sometimes differs quite a lot from Unity, I would say. So these examples are for you to don't get crazy and don't reinvent the wheel and just understand how to do it right away. We also have the remote service gateway, which is not related to this video really, but is sort of like something I mentioned in the AI AR release. This allows you to connect safely to things like Gemini, OpenAI, DeepSeek. Actually, all of these assets that you see here are part of this essential project, which is still in that narrative of doing things like you would do it in Unity. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. These are a lot of examples that allow you really to get an understanding how to do things in Lens Studio. So I recommend you, if you're a Unity developer, to start really with this project, because it really gives you all of the basic entry points, like hooking up a button, hooking up a gesture, access a component, do an animation. We also have some mini demos here, like archery, for example, how to build a large game. This, and this is a geometry trick, right? So how to get the closest point on a line and charge basically your arch. These are little things that geometry-wise are very common across a lot of engines. You just write it in different ways. So it's really straightforward. And we can also take a look at the scripting for a second, which is also, of course, a major difference. With Unity, you have C#. In Lens Studio, as I mentioned, you have JavaScript and TypeScript. But if you just take a look at the inspector, this is really similar to Unity, right? You are basically, it's scene object reference space. You just have references, you have parameters and things like that. Now, let's try to open this script. If you edit the script, what happens is a script editor will open. The script editor is something I would say pretty particular of Lens Studio, which I was quite surprised at the beginning when I saw it for the first time, because I was like, wow, there is actually an IDE embedded into the game engine. But at the same time, you will understand very quickly that if you do everything with this editor, things get quite limited. I think this is great for quick edits, or if you know already what to do and you want to make a minor change. But if you really want to think about your project on a holistic way and you want to take advantage of tools like Copilot, Cursor, things like that, what you want to do instead is actually opening the root project from ease of your preferences. So let's take a look, for example, at Cursor. And I'm going to just inject in this tutorial something that I mentioned in another tutorial, but that was quite a long time ago. So I'm going to go through this for a second. I believe it's really related to Unity, because the thing is that LLMs and other services know C# a little better because it's been there for a while. So web scraping for training model might have a very strong impact when you're asking questions for C# and you get actually code that makes sense. But actually you can get very close to that result, if not the same result, if you do things this way. So I'm going to show you how I would do it if I were you. So if I start a project from scratch and I don't have to do minor edits using the script editor, I actually would disregard the script editor. So I wouldn't use, if we save this project in desktop, essential, Cursor, and we open at the root, right? Something nice about Cursor, which I noticed, is this settings called use documentation. So make sure you do this. If you're starting to use Lens Studio with Cursor, which I believe together with Visual Studio Code is probably one of the best, but you can also use anything else. I'm not too familiar maybe with other tools, but this is great. They have this section called indexing and docs, which I believe they changed it. They updated from, oh wow, they probably did something different. Before it was called use documentation. Now they actually call it indexing and docs. So look what's happening here. I just opened the project and is indexing automatically all of the content of my project. Recursively is going really through all of the files. This is probably acting as a sort of batch operation for having a lot of context about what your project is. So actually there's look at this. There is actually a toggle that says index new folders. Great, I take it. What I wanted to do initially was actually something I did here, and it's already present because I did it already in the previous version, and it's adding a docs. So you see that Land Studio here, it's already been added. Now I want to show you what I mean. What I want to do here is go on the API reference, and then we have the Land Studio Scripting and Studio Editor API. What you want to index is actually this link allows you to have the full API list, HTML, and I already did it. Actually, let me do it with the editor now, so you see how the process looks like. If we go in editor and we click on full API list, we copy this link, and then we go in here, we add docs, just paste it, and then it should automatically add in the docs. They changed the UI, so you need to actually click enter now, and we can just change and just say editor, and then you can confirm. So now we have indexed also Land Studio editor. Now we're good to go and start to code on things in this project, on anything we want to. And really important, whenever you insert your prompt, be very detailed and ask a lot of things with context. For example, if you're trying to make, let's go, just want to show you a little bit. Let's go on the instantiation side, right? You got to instantiate something sometime. It's something pretty common. I believe you did it in multiple of your application and test. There is quite a comprehensive list of example, but let's say we instantiate on 3D grids. So let's see, where is my 3D grid? So cool, we have a sample that shows us how to instantiate things on a 3D grid. So we have a utility that already does this for us. Once again, as a Unity developer, you might think, where is my grid here, right? The reason it's not there is because this instantiation is something that works on runtime. Of course, we don't want to just place a cube one by one. So this particular utilities try to take advantage of runtime, doing things at runtime. So it's a more scalable way, of course, to work. But let's say I want to modify things, and let's see, I want to randomize. And I want to randomize in this grid some shapes. So I want to turn off some cubes. So these are all positions. And if we want to, for example, have a sort of pixelated effect, this could be at all of the mesh and then attach stuff to it. Or I just want to make something particularly and I say, hey, like, start from this grid and do something different. What you want to do is really just go on cursor and provide in the context your instantiation scripts. We provide almost all of these utility in JavaScript and TypeScript, but I really recommend you to take advantage of TypeScript first, as it's very similar to Unity. So my suggestion is really thinking in this way, and this could be applied to a lot of other things, but be creative first and then provide really the closest references of what you want to do. Let's go back on the comparison between Unity and Land Studio. So if you are working with XR in Unity, most likely you are using an interaction SDK. Now, there is a lot of choices out there, but more or less, the concept is always the same. There is an interactor object, which is acting upon an interactable. This interactable receives some input, receives some events, and then trigger callbacks that are things like on-click exit, which in some interaction tool, these starts to be very abstract and general. So usually in Unity, if you think about the XR toolkit, you would see probably enter, select exit over exit. So not that different really here, how things work. First of all, let's see how the variables are. These patterns is something that once you copy it 2 or 3 times, you already know what to do. So it's not that different. Actually, I think after you try some, you understand, oh, so actually I can do more stuff. It's, I can learn because I have that kind of basic knowledge. Now I can just enter in different spaces and just apply my knowledge. So I think it's like a cool thing to do and cool way to think of yourself as full stack XR engineer or developer or designer. So I recommend you to really take this as extending your knowledge and be able to do the same thing on every platform. So let's see here, we have an input, which is not something that you would see in Unity. You have this thing called allow undefined, which is also something that you wouldn't see in Unity. But the cool thing about allow undefined is that gives you an understanding of if it's allowed, the undefined means that if you don't define that variable, it's not going to throw you an error. So double-edged word here again, because if you don't put it, it's going to throw you an error. Errors are bad, they look bad, but also they tell you what's wrong. So let's say if we remove allow undefined and there's not an object that is part of our prefab here reference, it's going to throw us, hey, where is your prefab? So it's actually helpful. Hints are kind of tooltips that you would have. We also have a native logger of part of SDK, but you don't really need to use it. If you want, you can, instead of debug log, you can just use print. So we actually print it in different ways for you if you want to understand how to do it. Scene object, of course, is game object, but parent, get child is always the same. And then you see here that you have a reference to this interactable. And you have just number, like a float or integer you would have in Unity, int float. Let's see what happens here on the awake. So once again, Unity, pretty straightforward in terms of how you build your script. If you're not doing something crazy, the common pattern is always the same, like awake, start, update, late update. You have some coroutines, which here are called delay, callbacks. And then those are the most common patterns that you use in Unity. You can get very far just with those. Then, of course, you have those colliders, which you have on enter, on stay, and on exit, which we also have an example, by the way, here, or how you trigger colliders and how you just define the different states of the colliders. And let's take a look what happens on events. So major difference with Unity, I would say, is that on awake, you need to subscribe the start and update events. To make it more clear, we have another example here, which was, I believe, this is the gesture hookup. You can see here that I'm creating an event and binding it to this specific execution order. So Unity, you have start and so on and so on. Here, what you need to do on awake is subscribe to different execution orders. In this case, I created a start and I created not an update, but I actually created this update object movement. So just to give you an understanding, if I do this on and I have on start, of course, do not repeat it twice. Otherwise, it's going to throw you an error. If I have these two, I basically just have on awake, on start, and on update. So this is really the Unity patterns that you would need. Then here we have an example of how to subscribe to things. You can also avoid, by the way, to create event, to create an update, which is something cool I thought at first. As a Unity developer, I thought actually you don't even need to create an update. You can just create the update event and I bind my own function called update object movement. So I have them all here on awake in one place. So not necessarily you need to keep that structure. You can actually have everything in there. This instead is an example of callback for things like left hand pinch down or click on a button. So let's go back on the button one here. This is how you would subscribe to an interactable that you reference in your inputs. So you already know how to do a gesture event and you already know how to do a button event. You already know how to set up variables to have an awake, a start, an update method. You basically are done with everything you need to just start to build stuff and specs. You know, like this is, or let's say if you start to use Lens Studio, that's what I mean. This is the way you would do coroutines. So delayed callback event, and then you describe how many seconds you want and things like that. But this is also an example. This is the destroy delay, by the way. And pretty much that's really it in terms of execution order. So not much more. Of course, there are a lot of nuances, right? Everything is not just done. Another major component is the raycast. So how do you create a raycast? You got an example here for you. It just tells you how to create a raycast, gives you a start and endpoint position, and then you go with hit, and then you describe a collider particularly, and then you just do stuff with it. When you hit the position, you just can eventually just do anything you want on it. But very straightforward. Again, this is the way you create raycasts. What else is very common in Unity, and we also transposed it in this sample, solvers. So if you ever played with a lot of a lot of XR interaction toolkits, you know that solvers have a very important role that is placing informations around you. One of my favorite topic, if you ask me, because it creates it really makes a lot of difference, the way how things are positioned in space. Just imagine giving a keyboard in front of you, how this keyboard is going to be instantiated, or how you see this panel in front of you. It really makes a big difference. And to me, those behaviors are those ones that make a person think about, oh, I can actually use this application for more than 20 minutes, or I'm just out of it because I don't understand what's going on. Everything is overlapping. It doesn't follow me. I don't understand if it needs to follow me. It's too far. It's too close. Those things are a very big percentage of how people receive XR as a beginner and also as an expert. So my suggestion is really to include a lot of this and really thoughtfully design your experience for accommodate whatever is the use case that you have to go through. So here we have a lot of solvers, right? Very common Unity things that at least I used a lot. Not specific to Unity, of course, but specific to a lot of interaction kits that I've seen in Unity. So this is called match transfer, for example. Then we have something like look at. So you know what it is, right? You're just looking at something and the things are just looking constantly at a target. Then we have something like scaling based on distance. This is another one. Then we have probably one of the most used, which is the tether based on your head position. Things move very smoothly in front of you. This is going to be avoiding a lot of jittery movements for your applications. So once again, highly recommended. And then we have a lot more, but I'm not going to go through them. Please explore these patterns. These are very important. Maybe another major one to mention real quick is how collision works. We have an example of a soft button. How can it work? This is, by the way, this is just an implementation of it. You could do it in 1,000 ways, but there is a collider, and if the state is inside, outside of this collider, if it's staying. So these things are very common. And once again, you can just open it this way, take a sneak peek real quick, or you can just use things like cursor and just go through here and just take a look at your script. My recommendation is really just if you are trying to really understand what's going on, please use an IDE. And for getting that automatically in Land Studio, you can just go into the preferences and enable these two checkboxes here. So editors always open in external, so you can see. So we're almost at the end, and I also want to tackle a final question that I always had. I received so many times and it really was like, so you can do all of this good stuff, but I can also just do it in Unity. Why don't you make it easy to just deploy things from Unity anyway? Do we really need this, right? And my answer is, well, once again, open your mind a second and think about, do you really want just to have one tool for everything? Number one, might be cross-platform, of course, is just a great advantage, but at the same time, the ecosystem of a product is also very important, right? If you develop products with Apple and you're an Apple core person, you know that everyone coded in Swift and they use Xcode. Then, of course, you can use also with Unity, yes, but if someone is an Apple person, is not using that, is using Xcode or Swift in general. So there is also the other possibility. And why the ecosystem is so important from a developer standpoint, because it's speed in having a very focused mission and really staying focused on what you have to do without looking for compliance from an external actor, right? So once again, this is my total personal interpretation of things. Once again, the latest version of Spectacles has been out only for 6 months. The usage of it, what is possible with it, is still something that is, after all, a developer release. And seeing that already there are so many use cases, and see that a lot of developers came to me for things that I would never thought that they wanted to build on Spectacles. I was like, so that maybe makes me think about a future where things could evolve in any ways, because it always depends what trends of the industry and what developer wants. And I assume that the work of all of these companies is just making it easier for everyone to work with. But if you ask me, from my experience as a Unity developer in Land Studio, I really feel so much lighter in terms of, well, the headset is lighter, but also I feel so much lighter in terms of what I do in this editor and how does it feel to work with it. It's really focused on one mission, which is augmented reality. And if that's your thing, I feel like there is no better alternative to use. If I didn't mention it, there is a lot of examples for interaction. So let's go. And this is probably the last thing I'm going to show you. So hold on. If you go in here, you are going to see something called Spectacle Interaction Kit Examples. If you download it, you're going to get this package. I actually downloaded it twice. Didn't even notice. But if you just get these examples, prefab, and you just drag and drop it in your scene, you're going to have a lot of examples to start with in terms of UI and in terms of manipulation. So what I actually care about is, let's go check out some patterns for interaction. So let's go in here, and you notice that this is a manipulation object. Let's see how it's built. A lot similar to what I experienced in the Unity XR toolkit. This component has an interactable and it has a physics body. And then it has the interactable manipulation, which is probably a wrapper of the interactable. So it probably will require the interactable. And then you have some render mesh visual and so on. But if you go on a button, you will notice that the wrapper of the button, in this case is a toggle, has this checkbox called Edit Event Callbacks. So if you click on it, you can just drag and drop the script here, like you would do in events in interactables in Unity. And then here, you can just literally type the method that you want to call. So I know that in Unity, actually, this flow is a little different. Actually, you still need to drag and drop the callback into the slot here. And then you actually have the possibility to drop down and just select the exposed public method in your class. This is a little different. I believe things will change quickly and will keep improving. Not entirely sure that this will be part of this improvement, but I can see things becoming more and more robust to make it easy for developers, because we have a lot of developers that thankfully they flag us all of these little details. But once again, as I repeated before, there is a very similar pattern. So all of your knowledge doesn't need to be reset. All of your knowledge actually is very valuable, and I hope you can use it and take advantage of all of what you know and build things in multiple platforms instead of only one. A big difference between Lens Studio and Unity is that because the ecosystem of Lens Studio and Spectacles is so tight, all of the APIs that you see on the documentation are very much embedded and targeted to our headset, to our glasses. Meanwhile, things in Unity get very broad and general to allow cross-platform interoperability. But at the same time, it's very too broad sometimes to know something particularly for some platforms. So you have tools that just work on top of Unity, a lot of different SDKs. Instead, when you go on Lens Studio documentation, example, let me just take a look. When you go on the documentation of Spectacles, you have a sense as a developer that things are pretty contained, almost where to find all the pieces that you need. It feels like almost like something that you feel like you can handle, right? At least that's also the feeling that I had as a developer when I joined this platform. You know that for using a controller model, this is the page. You know that for the spatial image feature, this is the page. So it's more about telling you what's possible and then doing it than actually telling you how to do things and just try to do what's possible. I think that's probably the main difference in the developer flow, because the ecosystem is really oriented toward one only thing, which is building augmented reality on AR glasses. I hope this was helpful for you. If this is your thing, stay tuned for the next one. And please do not hesitate to let me know what you want to know, and I will be happy to provide a lot of examples for it. Peace.